What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to the FanDuel Running Back Analysis podcast for Week 9 NFL action. I'm Big Italy 42, talking about some of my favorite plays for your cash games, GPPs, and pretty much everything in between. So starting off here, one of the highest team totals of the week, and as expected, it's a team playing the Browns. It's the Dallas Cowboys. Ezekiel Elliott, most expensive on the board as far as running backs go, $9,200, but he may very well be worth it in this game. You're looking at just his pure yardage totals, and this includes receptions and rushes. The guy's posting massive numbers. His last 5 weeks, 148, 174, 171, 157, 160. Some of those in much tougher matchups than the one he's going to see here. The Browns ranked 31st, according to Football Outsiders, against the run, and they are second. Only one team has allowed more rushing yards than them. They've allowed 1,150 so far this year, 10 rushing touchdowns. This is a dream matchup for a guy who leads the league in yards per game. He's got 5 yards per attempt, almost 800 rushing yards, has 7 rushes of 20-plus yards. This one's kind of a no-brainer. You get Ezekiel Elliott into your cash games. He's a fine GPP play as well. He's got big-time upside. He is expensive, but he should be worth every penny for you this week. Cowboys team total, nearly 4 touchdowns, 27.75 there. So Ezekiel Elliott, go ahead and just lock him in there. Next up's a guy that I talked about last week as a GPP option, and this week we have him here. I'm listing him as a cash game option at $7,500. That's Matt Forte. This is a Dolphins team that ranks 17th, according to Football Outsiders, against the run. As far as yardage per game, however, they are the 3rd worst in the league, allowing over 135 yards per game. Matt Forte had some ups and downs this season, had some big-time games, struggled in some games. But as we've seen over the last 2 weeks, this is a guy who's still capable of being a workhorse. He is $7,500 this week on FanDuel. 2 weeks ago, we saw him with 30 carries for 100 yards and a touchdown, also 4 receptions for 54 and another touchdown. Last week, 25 for 82 and a pair of scores and 2 catches through the air for 16 yards. That makes 3 games now this season where he's found the end zone at least twice. Only 1 receiving touchdown this year, but 6 touchdowns on the ground. This is a team that's been very inconsistent as far as the pass goes this season. So with Ryan Fitzpatrick back under center kind of by default, this is a team that you expect is still going to rely on the pass or the running game here. In this one, as you look at a Miami team that is ranked 10th against the pass, 17th against the run. But, this is a team that is definitely better served to be targeted on the ground, especially with a team with such an anemic passing attack. So Matt Forte, $7,500, certainly a guy that I like in cash games, and he's got GPP upside for you there as well. Moving on now to GPP running backs. This first one, certainly very risky. That's why I listed him as a GPP option. $6,100 Tim Hightower. The Saints, as you might know from me and many others, I'm sure, don't really like to target the Saints on the road. However, as you're looking at this one, team total of 27.5 points just behind the Cowboys. The 49ers are just abysmal against the run, pretty terrible against the pass as well. Football Outsiders has them 30th in the league. They have allowed almost 1,300 yards rushing, 185 yards per game. And if you remember, right, the first week, they shut down Todd Gurley. So imagine what those numbers would be had Todd Gurley gotten off in week 1. But with that all being said, Mark Ingram last week got benched for a fumble. That's been an issue of his at times throughout his career. Tim Hightower, not a particularly talented back. There's a reason why this guy is a backup for a team that, relies primarily on the pass. But Hightower was decent in his stead last week. 26 rushes for 102 yards. 49ers, like I mentioned, this is a spot where if we had a clear-cut number 1 running back, he would be one of the most popular plays on the board. I'm not sure that I trust Ingram, especially seeing how he got benched last week. So either Ingram or a Hightower, very risky options, but it's a tremendous matchup. So for me, I'll go a little bit cheaper and go with Hightower as my GPP option there. But just to put this in further perspective, he doesn't even have a picture on FanDuel. He's just a silhouette. So Tim Hightower, GPP option for you there. Next up, Theo Riddick. The Lions with the lowest team total on the board this week at just 18 points against the Minnesota Vikings, a defense that was tremendous in the early going. Last week just got gashed by Jordan Howard, who wasn't even playing particularly well over the past couple weeks. 202 total yards and a score there. He was the top running back of the week. Obviously, you're not expecting Riddick to have that type of game. He's not a volume runner as far as rushing attempts. He has more value in the passing game. As you see, each of the last 2 games he's played, he's had 11 carries. But over the last 2 games he's played, obviously a couple weeks in between with injuries, 11 for 49 on the ground, 6 catches, 6 targets for 33 and 2 scores, then 11 for 56 and 8 on 11 targets for 77 and a score last week. He was on the field for over 85% of the snaps last week. Certainly this is not a good matchup, but this is a spot where you're going to see low ownership. You imagine that the Lions will have a tough time scoring in this game. So short passing game, especially if they get behind in this one because their defense is awful. You expect even Minnesota will be able to score some points on them. I think Theo Riddick is a really interesting option there at $6,600. Certainly not a cash game play, but he's a really interesting GPP guy for me. Value running backs, this first one's not going to surprise anybody. Neither one of them will, to be honest with you. Jamal Charles on the IR. We've got Spencer Ware, unlikely to play, isn't officially ruled out. So we're looking at Charkandrick West as being kind of the chalk option this week at running back. $5,600 is incredibly cheap. The Chiefs have a sneaky high team total, 25.5 points. Jags ranked 27th against the run. West last week, after coming in, 13 carries, 52 yards, 2 catches for 8 yards. Obviously, now Davis is gone. Alex Smith won't be playing in this one. You've got Charles and likely Ware out. Jeremy Maclin is dealing with a bad hamstring. So this is a situation where we could see an enormous workload from Charkandrick West. And while Ware and Jamal Charles are obviously much more talented backs, there's a default situation where he's just going to see a ton of work. So I'm definitely on him, and he's a guy that you really don't want to miss out on in your cash games. Next up, Devontae Booker. His price went up quite a bit after last week. 84 total yards and a score on 24 touches last week against a Chargers defense that's actually been pretty good against the run, only 3.8 yards per attempt. However, this week it's the Raiders, nearly 5 yards per attempt. They're allowing 25th in the league against the run, according to Football Outsiders. Obviously, Booker's price went up to $7K, but he's still a guy who I think is a viable play at this option in all formats. I think Ezekiel Elliott, Charkandrick West is kind of the options that I'd be going with in cash games. I think that's where a lot of people will be going, but he's certainly a viable GPP swerve. Or, you know, maybe if you just aren't a fan of Charkandrick West, or if we hear maybe that Spencer Ware will be playing in some limited capacity, which I don't expect, I could see him as a swerve off of that. But for me, Devontae Booker is still just going to be locked into this big role, and CJ Anderson maybe comes back to the playoffs. Who knows? I mean, this is his job. So he's going to see a nice volume attack there. And Raiders defense has just been very, very poor this year. So, all right, that's going to wrap things up here for the FanDuel running back analysis. Find us on Twitter at DFCafe and check out the rest of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.